unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Depth, a production of Souls and Liberty.
It's about the fact that as a culture, we have demonised men and masculinity to the point where young men in particular feel rudderless and they're looking for something to hold on to.
33 days to go, and against the backdrop of Trump versus Kamala, the gender divide is coming into sharper focus. For the first time ever, young American men are more religious than young American women.
You can't dismantle a society for 50, 60, 70 years, dismantle every tradition, dismantle, all of it, take them away from everything and teach them garbage, and then expect them to function properly.
Joining us today to talk about this first-of-a-kind phenomenon is Souls and Liberty contributor Arthur Claroux. I'm your host for today, Stephen Wynn, coming to you from Kansas City. A sea change is underway across the American religious landscape. Take a look at this. The New York Times reports that in a first among Christians, young men are more religious than young women. For the first time in modern American history, the Times reports, young men are now more religious than their female peers. They attend services more often and are more likely to identify as religious. Among Generation Z Christians, this dynamic is playing out in a stark way. The men are staying in church while the women are leaving at a remarkable clip. Arthur, this is fascinating. We've known for some time that as our culture continues to disintegrate, young men are becoming more conservative than young women. But it appears now that this phenomenon is not limited to the political sphere, but it's impacting church pews as well.
It's interesting, though, because this is something that you could have seen coming a mile away with the way that the general society has been treating men for a very long time. At least the last 20 years, there's been this continued messaging that you're not wanted here. We're not going to hire you. We're not going to promote you. If we can get literally anyone besides you, we're going to take them. You're bad at school. You're a bad person. You as a gender are just bad. Go away. And for whatever reason, whoever was pushing that messaging thought, whatever they thought they were accomplishing, what ended up happening is they pushed men generally outside of society. In previous societies, that would have been cause for all sorts of problems. But in our current society, one thing that those men noticed was there are other things that society has generally pushed away in the same way, that society just absolutely hates. One of those is Christianity. Another of those is Western civilization. Just so happens to be the civilization of their forefathers. And so I think that there's a certain recognition of that and move towards that. Hey, look, if they hate us and that, maybe these are good things. Maybe these things go together. And then I think that where it really came in was you had certain people like Jordan Peterson step up and say, look, you're not horrible. You're not evil. You're just a guy. And you need good guidance. You need good leadership. And you know what? You need church and you need mentorship and patrons and all that sort of stuff. And he took so much flack for that. I don't know if you remember, but 2015, 2016, 2017, he was on news shows that were saying, your audience is 70% men. What's wrong with you? Right. And I remember him I remember watching that thing like, what do you mean, what's wrong with you? Are they not allowed to be an audience? Like, what's going on here? So the fact that someone stood up for them and then helped point them in that direction, I think played a big role in this.
Yeah, right. I agree. I think that's a bullseye. And ultimately, I think that young men are seeking God because they're seeking hope, really. And we'll dive further into this question when we return. Stay tuned.
The establishment has tried to assassinate President Trump twice. But we can't really be shocked that those who slaughter 1 million unborn babies each year would try to kill one more human being who stands in the way of their diabolical agenda. Trump, like every one of us, including all of us at Souls and Liberty, is a sinner. But like all of us, he is in the fight and fighting for all of us to get one more chance, maybe a last chance, to save the republic. We must hang together, or as Benjamin Franklin said, we shall hang separately. And maybe far sooner than many imagine, because communists take over and always persecute Christians and Catholics in particular. Let us help you fight these forces of evil. Become a monthly supporter today so we can continue giving you the information, the tools of our faith, and the support network you need to go out and save souls and save our nation. Join our merry band of happy warriors and click below to get into the fight. We need you, we need each other. Join the resistance. Become a monthly donor today.
Arthur, it seems that the surge in young men embracing religion is really a reflection of the natural law, almost a consequence of America descending further and further into depravity. I think that unraveling, especially the unraveling of an entire culture, can be a comparatively slow process. For many people, it goes by unnoticed, especially by the young. I'm a member of Generation X, and when I was coming of age in the 1990s, for example, the fruits of the sexual revolution, poisonous fruits, they were there, but they hadn't really come into full focus. I mean, yes, there were all kinds of, problems, unplanned pregnancies, sexually transmitted diseases, AIDS in particular was a massive fear. But for, many young people, I think many young men in particular, that they were not impacted by these threats. For some who got their girlfriends pregnant, well, that's her body, her choice, and they were left out of all of the ramifications with that. Yes, many people got AIDS, but that was largely confined to certain demographics, certain folks who were practicing particularly dangerous sexual practices, basically. And so for a lot of people, they just kind of passed through playing the field, so to speak, without an incredible amount of damage. Well, now fast forward 30 years, and I think the ramifications of the sexual revolution have come into much sharper focus. For Generation Z, unplanned pregnancy and sexually transmitted diseases, those are threats, of course, but I think largely they've been overshadowed by an even greater threat, and that is the crisis of identity. An entire generation of men has been emasculated and effeminized, and as a result, they're wandering aimless and full of despair. Meanwhile, an entire generation of women has been hypersexualized and self-aggrandized. They're succumbing to lust and pride. You see these complaints about this everywhere on social media. It seems as though manhood and womanhood have been stripped of all meaning, and men and women, men especially, are just out there wandering lost. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is such a huge deal right now. It's hard to imagine that you'd have entire industries popping up to help men learn how to be men and women be women, and how to have a relationship and how to date, and all these things that people did for thousands of years without an industry around them, and did perfectly well, perfectly successful. And it's really tragic because it's not their fault, right? You can't dismantle a society for 50, 60, 70 years, dismantle every tradition, dismantle, all of it, take them away from everything and teach them garbage, and then expect them to function properly. I mean, they have the instinct in there somewhere. They know when they hear what the right thing is, because there is a certain natural instinct, but it's clouded in confusion, enforced confusion, very sadly. And I think what this shows is comparable to the biblical stories of Israel. These cycles are very real. So in the Bible, you hear stories all the time of, well, the parents forgot to teach their children the way that God wants them to be. The children forgot God, started doing all sorts of nonsense, and then punishment came because of it. And sometimes we read that and we think, okay, God punished them. He went out of his way, he slapped them, and then moved back on. I don't think it's like that. I have this theory on this, that God has set all these natural laws in place, like gravity. And the same sorts of natural laws apply to human beings. And when you make bad choices, you reap bad consequences. And it's not God personally coming down to give you bad consequences. That's just how the world works. It's like when you do a bad math formula and you get a wrong answer. It's how it goes. And so I think what they were experiencing in the Bible, like what we're experiencing today, is you forget the way you're supposed to do things. You forget the way that things work, because it's like the straight gate and narrow way argument. a lot of the things we want to do that our natural proclivities think are great, especially, like you were talking about the sexual revolution, they sound wonderful and we want them to be okay, but the consequences are dire. And that's what we're seeing today. I mean, people can't even pair bond anymore. Families aren't being formed. Children are not being born. We have a crisis of what's the right word here? Not replication, but a crisis, a birth rate crisis. All of these things, these are all connected.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very well said. Yeah, I think ultimately all of this that we're seeing, the crisis of identity, especially, it's really a chastisement. God's letting us reap what we sow, basically, I think. When we return, what sort of refuge will young men find in religion?
Go to mypillow.com or call the number on the screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of wholesale pricing for the first time ever on TV, including my standard size MyPillow, only $14.88. They've never been offered this low before. We have limited quantities at this price, so limit's going to be 10, and once they're gone, they're gone.
No matter who wins in November, we have to embrace that we are living in a post-Christendom culture. And the heart of that is a rejection of the gospel. As one item on our agenda to combat this, Souls and Liberty is hosting our first annual retreat at sea. You might be familiar with the annual event we produced for over 10 years at Church Militant. Dr. Jules Gomez, our Rome correspondent, and I are going to be doing the presenting, and the theme is Christians in Exile Triumphing in Adversity, which provides a whole range of discussions to think about. Now, we sail out of Galveston, Texas to the Western Caribbean November 10th to the 17th, yes, right after the election. I think all of us are probably going to need it one way or the other. Please join us for serious discussion, spiritual preparation, and bonding, very important, bonding with fellow Catholics. Registration information is provided below and on our site at soulsandliberty.com/retreat-at-sea 2024. So sign up and we hope to see you there.
So, Arthur, as we've seen, increasing numbers of young men are seeking God's guidance as they try to navigate the splintering of American society. And certainly there are pockets of strong militant Christianity across the United States. But at the same time, there are many, many effeminized priests and pastors who offer nothing but a compromised Christianity. So, question to you. Is the church ready to receive these young men? Is it equipped to give them what they need?
That's the question that I've had for over a year now. I mean, let's really quickly say this. If the New York Times is finally reporting on this means it's been happening for about 3 to 5 years. So it's not brand new. This has been ongoing for a while. But even now, I'm not sure the church is ready to receive these men. Specifically because of what you said. There are pockets of masculine Christianity. There are pockets of real, really well-grounded, faith-based Christianity, but there are large portions of every single denomination that have given over to the spirit of the age. And they've bought into the feminist propaganda. They've bought into the Marxist propaganda. They've bought into the multicultural propaganda. I mean, you can go from the Pope pushing this interfaith, agenda to the Southern Baptists pushing for a Zionist or a pro-feminist or any of these sorts of things. There's so many kind of just trip-offs in the church, and what I'm really concerned with is that the church fumbles the ball. The ball has literally been dropped in their hands. They're they're at the end zone. All they have to do is walk across. I really hope they don't fumble this, and I think that if they can return to a sort of, it doesn't need to be masculine, but a sort of meaty understanding and teaching of the scripture, I think that God will take care of the rest of this. I personally have gone to numerous churches looking for one where I can really kind of settle in. And between the donation asks, which is of course important, everyone has donation asks, sure. But and the kind of sermons that, and then maybe this is arrogant, but I felt like I could teach myself. It really felt almost empty. So if there is an aspect of this where there's going to need to be community building, there's going to need to be some depth and some philosophical search, and that's somewhere where I think the Catholic Church has quite an advantage.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think the data really out there really proves your point. We see time and again that it's the faithful Catholic parishes, the faithful evangelical churches that are thriving, that are growing. Mainline Protestant denominations are imploding. Liberal Catholic dioceses, they're doing nothing but managing the decline. Parish closing after parish closing. So orthodoxy breeds growth, I think. In fact, back in July, the New York Times reported that the progressive priests that predominated from the 1960s to the 1980s, they're quickly vanishing as they die off and head off to their eternal reward, whatever that may be. And meanwhile, America's new crop of Catholic priests is almost entirely conservative, faithful to church teaching. And I say thank God for that. Arthur, bring us home. Give us your final thought.
Yeah, thank God for that indeed. I think to your point, there's an element, like I said earlier, of philosophical soundness that needs to be there. This was the issue, I think, with the New Atheists and many rounds of atheists that have come before that kind of tripped off entire generations of people. Many churches were not teaching the philosophical basis of, and I know philosophy sounds boring, and a lot of people, like, they hear that word and their eyes just glaze over and they're like, yeah, I'm done. But it doesn't need to be a lecture. You just need to have reason for why things are done the way they've done. And people need to be taught that. It needs to be beyond just the stories and anecdotes. It needs to be a deep understanding of natural law, for example, of why God set things in place the way he did, and just building on that so that people understand the world around them. I think that's a key, a common desire from everyone. We all want to understand the world around us. It helps us better navigate it. And I think the church is very well positioned to do that. And I think the church is intended to do that. So yeah, let's hope that is making a comeback. There's huge excitement around the fact that so many priests and so many new clergymen, and this applies to most of the high church, to be honest. There's a lot of people moving into this that are conservative for Christianity.
Amen. Let's hope and pray that it keeps heading in that direction. All right, Arthur, 33 days to go. Thank you for your analysis. Excellent as always. And to our viewers, as always, thank you for tuning in.